Costello found himself thinking a lot more of late. Sometimes it was out loud, which turned quite a few heads. Walking around downtown wasn't normally a place where walking past someone talking to themselves was a big deal, but Costello's lingering agoraphobia didn't allow him to just be at peace with his behavior. He brought more attention to himself than would have ever happened had he just mumbled along the sidewalks. So much was suddenly processing inside of his consciousness. There was also the contest of emotions dueling alongside his galaxy of thoughts. The excitement of his new friendship and the upcoming cycling tour were at war with his fears of incarceration until his bones turned to dust. Each day began to boil down to hours and then minutes, so he started managing the duality much better. The idea of an itinerary was fascinating to Costello. After years of being employed within the bar scene, he was curious what others considered a good time. He hadn't asked Avery, but he assumed she was younger than him. He has a few years on Jenna, and if they were coworkers, then good chance she's younger and probably much more in tune with whatever is a good time anymore. He had narrowed his personal expectations to any place that would invite him in and let him drink as much tequila as he liked. Apparently, there's more to an outing than getting shit-faced. This is why he pulled out his shoes he rarely wears. There's something about what you put on your feet. Costello focused on how we adorn our eyes, hands, and feet. He's a firm believer in anyone wearing a simple pair of pants and a clean blank shirt, so long as they spent a little money on their shoes, socks, watch, and if they need them, their glasses. Just as he approaches Avery's bar, she texts him, "I'm running a little late, so go grab Shane and they'll take care of you until I get there. They have hair dyed grayish blue, a beard, and a tattoo on their forearm of a meat tenderizer and a bundle of lavender." Costello texts back, "Can't wait to meet him." Just as he realizes what a ridiculous response that was, and that he may have misgendered her coworker, Shane walks right up to him and acts as though they've known each other their entire lives. He sits him down in the same chair Avery did the day he met her. It all happened so fast. Costello just rolled along and took a seat. He ordered a Mexican lager and the day was off and running. When he finished his beer and Avery was still not there, he began to fret. He had no problem ordering another drink. Hell, that was right in his wheelhouse. It was whether or not to text her and see if she was coming. He overheard another couple having drinks mention their friend was late and, as usual, late without an update. He assumed this may just be normal, so he ordered another beer and settled in. The day was remarkable. Sunlight peeking through the buildings and cool enough to let the sun rest on your skin comfortably. Something about sitting in the bowels of Los Angeles, knowing out there are thousands of people gazing at the skyline, snapping photos and appreciating the city of angels from afar. A team of cyclists flew by and his enjoyment nearly topped off. Even the hollering from locals who live in the alcoves and tent cities seemed to harmonize with all the other city sounds and create a beautiful symphony of existence. In the calm undertow of this afternoon was a penchant for structure that was missing, like comedy from overpaid comedians' social media. Costello was fighting a compelling urge to get everything in order and find out why he's still sitting alone. Sitting alone, while he should be force socializing with Avery. His new friend is now over a half an hour late, and he's questioning her motives. He came up from the tide and realized he'd slipped quite some distance out to sea and was ready to call for a lifeguard. He waved at Shane as they walked by and saw the worry plastered all over the parts of their face not covered with a burly mid-Atlantic beard. Shane ran over and told Costello they got busy and spaced on telling him about the next stop. Avery conjured up some sort of a scavenger hunt. Shane failed to provide the clue he needed to be on his way, so said the beers were on them and told Costello to hurry down to the back patio at La Cita Bar. They were supposed to provide a riddle to figure out where to go, but since they turned the entire thing into a fucking train wreck, Just send him on his way. On his way out, Shane hollered at Costello and said the clue was a bar where Jenna used to do Amy Winehouse cover contests. Costello stood there and gazed at Shane. I would have known the answer to that riddle, he responded with a bit of a tone. Shane shot back. Dude, I'm sorry. I got busy. I don't even know you. Avery just dropped this on me. I'm sorry. I owe you. How about I cook for you guys? Is that what the tattoo was all about? Because now I'm intrigued. I tell you what, let's talk about that. Thank you for the beers, Costello said. Thank you for being so forgiving, Shane replied. Costello hurried off. Costello stormed into La Cita with authority. His ego was absurd. So much he had to go stare in the mirror and talk himself down before finally joining Avery. He continued out back, and in the far corner sat someone who looked reminiscent of Avery, except she was giving him an ice-cold stare. She waved him over. He was about 60% sure it was her, except he hadn't seen her outside of work for quite some time, and this woman was dressed far better than he was. He acknowledged her attention and dealt with being conflicted over her seemingly upset demeanor, coupled with the phenomenal appearance. Then he got closer and realized it wasn't her. She came right out and said she wasn't Avery. Costello was having a moment, and she could see it all over his face. He snapped and interrupted this unknown woman to ask who she was and why she wasn't Avery. Are you not satisfied? She said with fierce bravado. I'm confused, Costello fired back. Then Avery has done her job, the mysterious woman said. She went on to explain that his life was about to take on new shape. She pointed to the bar where Avery was bellied up talking with two fellers Costello would refer to as barfly parasites. The kind of guys who frequent bars with a mission of hassling the loveliest ladies they can find, so they can ruin their outing by overloading them with knowledge they could care less about, all in effort to run them back to their lair for whatever god-awful things they find arousing. Costello did an about face and began to step towards the bar. Don't, the woman said bluntly. Costello halted and turned to observe her expression. She lifted her eyelids and awaited his response. He said nothing. They're harmless. They may look duplicitous, but they're just a couple of her regulars, she explained calmly. Costello pivoted all the way back towards her. I'm Hope, Avery's sister. So she told me you're going to be cycling across the country. That is fucking amazing. How about you tell me about it? She said, settling Costello. Costello looked over his shoulder at Avery and then sat down as his nerves settled. His vision cleared up and he realized she and her sister were dressed similarly and both quite stunningly. He didn't get into great detail about the tour with Hope, though he was kind enough to give her the basic rundown about his history with cycling and how the Tour de Maine was a lifelong dream. She was very fascinated. She was also rather inspirational. Hope pointed out that he arrived quite tense and quick to draw conclusions that could have led to rash decisions. She weaved this in with the logistics of his tour, pointing out that it would behoove him to maintain focus and calm for such a daunting mission. Just as she placed the exclamation point on her advice, she welcomed back her sister to the table and assured Avery she had taken great care of Costello in her stead. Avery offered her appreciation and then pointed out that Hope's welcome was well worn out and it was time to move along with her own Sunday afternoon plans. Hope bid Costello a farewell and kissed Avery on the forehead on her way out. How's your day been? Avery said with pounds of irresistible bewitchery. Costello smiled through a microcosm of rage he wasn't sure about and took in a deep breath. Is this all over my head, or am I in the midst of a deluded reverie? he blurted out as the weight of holding in his frustration was lifted away. Avery leaned over to Costello and pressed a single index finger against his lips. She told him it would all make sense in time. A waiter rushed over and she ordered for both of them. She was right. It was already somehow making sense. Costello began to feel like psychedelics were metabolizing in his body. It was as though every loose nut and disconnected wire were targeted by an expert and everything was being buttoned back together. All his life he had spent so much time acquiescing to his agoraphobia for comfort, and in this moment he was realizing the medicine he needed was to be uncomfortable long enough to force himself to figure out a solution. Amidst all this coming to terms with his social phobia and social consciousness, Costello had one tripwire in the back of his mind that sent waves of panic and cautiousness. His gut was telling him he was in good company, but somewhere in the cheap seats was a heckler trying to remind him to sleep with one eye open around Avery. The immediate, aggressive nature, the bizarre day of live riddles, and now this meeting with a capo after she scratched under her chin and shooed off her sister, if that even was her sister. He needed back on social media. Being a recluse made him quite the Snapchat sleuth. He was loading up his arsenal while also settling in for what looked to be a rather fun afternoon. May as well enjoy himself. Fuck's sakes, he's been tortured for the last 2 hours. Time to reap his reward and enjoy his day off before heading back to work tomorrow. That's actually starting to feel like a stupid idea now in retrospect. Their drinks came, and the day was back on track. The words came out of his mouth, and he realized how ridiculous this sounded. "So how long have you had a sister?" Costello stammered. Avery looked over the frame of her glasses. "Since I was born?" She fired back with a "you're fucking kidding me" tone. "Aaron, look, I know about your affliction. Jenna told me you have a difficult time in public. I know today has been a bit crazy, but this is a very standard day in most people's lives. I didn't want to make you feel like I was coddling you and get off on the wrong foot. If I scared you off, I could always try again. But you would always know you ran away from an opportunity for a new friendship, one with somebody who told you they want to talk to you about Jenna. You fought through it. Now I know you're a determined person, and you know I'm a pain in the ass. Win-win, right?" Avery said, quite compassionately. Costello responded, "You're not a pain in the ass. Not entirely. I mean, I appreciate this. I do, truly. I just need a drink." Avery smiled and said, "Before we get too many deep, because we will, may I address what I mentioned yesterday?" Costello nodded and braced himself for whatever was headed his way. "The night you first met Jenna, I mentioned I was with her. The reason she was with me at your bar was because I had been into your place and wanted to meet you. I'd been in a few times, and I have to admit I took a liking to you and made it my spot because I was hoping to grab your attention. You were normally in and out talking with bartenders and other staff like a manager or something. That night you were tending bar all night. Jenna didn't go out much, and I begged her to come with me because I never went out alone. I'd never told her how I felt about you, but while we were there, I asked her if she thought you were cute, and she just blurted out that she wouldn't mind fucking you. I don't know how you heard it, but you clearly did because you guys ended up going home together, and the rest was history," Avery told Costello. Costello stared for a few seconds and responded, You are Baby Buckles. You called the car that we shared to get home that night. You had your hair parted in the middle with 2 ribbons and clear frame glasses. You ordered gimlets and vodka shots. I didn't hear Jenna say anything. Long story. I couldn't take my eyes off you, but I thought you weren't into me at all." "Jenna told you she calls me Baby Buckles?" Avery asked. Costello said, She went on and on about how you would always sneak little shiny black shoes with buckles on mannequins when you guys merchandised a new look into the shop. Jenna loves you. She talked about you all the time. You remember what I ordered that night? Avery said with amazement. Look, I went on to have an amazing relationship with Jenna, but I'd never been more enamored by anyone in my life until I saw you that night. You know how life works, though? I resigned myself to the fact you weren't into me. And you should know, we did not fuck that night. I'm an old-fashioned gentleman. First date sex is off the books, Costello reassured Avery. Avery took a deep breath and waved at the server for 2 more drinks. She suddenly became stoic amidst all these revelations that would otherwise raise the temperature in most settings. There's more that you need to know. I've stayed in close contact with Jenna's family. I know you've reached out to them periodically. I also know they've kept something from you they've battled with for quite some time, Avery began to tell Costello. He sat frightened to hear what she was about to say. When Jenna started volunteering for that political campaign, she told her parents it was something she did for you. Apparently, you influenced her into following politics because of your mental illnesses. According to her, you went through phases of political soapboxing. She described these bouts as your secret activist. You would break down the political system and predict the fall of democracy, telling her not enough people were engaged in the grassroots of government. But you never did it yourself. So she decided to get involved. Her parents have never had the courage to tell you, but they feel like you influenced her into a situation that ultimately got her in her current state. I am so sorry, Aaron, Avery said softly. Costello's entire existence enveloped and swallowed him whole. Avery was talking softly, but he could almost not even hear her. The thumping of his pulse was shaking his vision. He closed his eyes and counted backwards from 10. Avery sat quietly and watched. He opened his eyes, exhaled, and said, I'm not going to pretend like what you just said didn't crush me into a million pieces. I'm not going to lie and say I appreciate you telling me because I wish I'd never heard that from anyone. However, I can't keep running back to my cave where I'm safe from the hard truths. Costello paused for a second and smiled. So where are you taking me next?